For centuries, an ancient curse was used to support the terrible evil of slavery, a curse that appears in one isolated verse in the Bible. Even today, this misunderstood curse still lingers with us as a legacy of shame. But fortunately, there are some who, through scholarship and honest examination, have exposed the lie of a cursed race. And in their pursuit of truth, they have rediscovered a long-lost heritage and identity in Africa and in the Bible. The myth of a cursed race, next on Day of Discovery. Hello, my name is Wintley Phipps. Wintley Phipps, a name that identifies who I am. But who am I? I'm a husband, I'm a father, but I'm also a descendant of slaves. Unless you've lived your life with darker skin, you may not appreciate what that question means to people like me. Sometimes I feel like a motherless child. Sometimes I feel like a motherless child. Sometimes I feel like a motherless child, a long way from home, a long way from home. Sometimes I feel like a motherless child. The music and words of the old spirituals reflected both the heartache and the hope of many slaves. Just imagine being captured and treated like animals, being shipped away forever from your family and your home. Imagine being sold like cattle. Imagine losing your language and, yes, even your name. Many of African enslaved descent have wondered at some point in their lives about their heritage and their identity. They have wondered about who they really are. But for those of us who take the Bible seriously, we know that no matter the race, the color, or ethnicity, we are all God's children. We know that in the eyes of God, we are all equal, and that no one is cursed because of color or race. But through the centuries, the Bible has been used, let's just say, in some ways that God never intended. Tragically, some found in its pages a curse by the prophet Noah that they have said created the black race of Africans. A curse that they claim sentenced an entire race to servitude and slavery. According to Professor of History, Dr. Edwin Yamauchi, no other verse in the Bible has been so distorted and so disastrously used down through the centuries for the exploitation of Africans and African Americans as that one obscure verse found in the opening chapters of the Bible in the book of Genesis.
If there's one verse in the Bible which has adversely affected Africans, it's the so-called curse of Ham, found in Genesis 9, verse 25. There we read, "Cursed be Canaan, the the lowest of slaves will he be to his brothers. This is a curse uttered by Noah. For those of you who are not familiar with the story, Noah became drunk, and then his three sons, Ham, Shem, and Japheth, were there at the time, but it was Ham who dared to look at Noah's naked body, and then he tried to encourage his brothers to do so, and they would not. They went backwards so as not to look at the sight of their naked father in his disgrace. See? Now, as the text stands, the curse is not upon Ham himself, but upon his son Canaan, who is the eponymous ancestor of the Canaanites. That is, the Canaanites are named after this particular son.
According to Dr. Yamauchi, the prophetic curse of Noah was most likely fulfilled on the Canaanites, the pagan descendants of Ham's son named Canaan, who, according to the Bible, settled in the region of what came to be called the Promised Land, the same descendants who continued in the disrespect and disobedience of their ancestor named Ham. As punishment, God commanded the Hebrews to conquer the Canaanites in order to protect his people from their destructive ways, including the idolatrous worship and child sacrifice. According to the records of history, the Canaanites and their curse have long been extinct. According to the Bible, none of Ham's other three sons were cursed, only Canaan. The descendants of Ham's son, Mitzrayim, settled in Egypt. Ham's son named Put settled near Libya, and his fourth son, Cush, settled in a region south of Egypt, which came to be called by the same name, Cush, as recorded in the Hebrew Bible. Most scholars identify Cush as the area of modern Sudan. The way that name Cush has been translated in English Bibles has created some confusion. German author and scholar Dr. Roland Werner has researched Christian history in Africa.
In the Bible, we find a reference to the country of Cush. And we find this in various places in the Old Testament. Genesis 10 in the Table of Nations as one of the neighbors of Mitzrayim, and Mitzrayim, of course, is Egypt, so Cush must be a neighbor of Egypt. We find the same word, Cush, mentioned again in Isaiah 18, in Psalm 68, and various other places. And people have wondered what that actually meant.
As author and New Testament professor Dr. Alan Callahan observes, the Greeks referred to the people from the region of Cush as Ethiopians.
These are the guys to whom the Greek writers referred to as Ethiopians, and the derivation of that word is in some dispute. Most people translated that as the people with the burnt faces, but these are, at least as Herodotus and people like that, Greek writers knew of these people. They knew of them as skilled warriors. You wouldn't want to fight them. They tended to be tall, dark. They're beautiful people, and the quintessence of civilization.
There was a little bit of a confusion because the Septuagint translation, which was the Greek translation of the Hebrew Bible, used the word Ethiopia, wherever Cush occurred in the Old Testament. So people naturally thought that this referred to the country that we now call Ethiopia. Of course, that is not entirely true. Cush is the neighbor of Egypt, which must be Sudan.
But how and when did ancient Cush become mislabeled and misinterpreted as a cursed black slave race? According to Dr. Yamauchi, author of Africa and the Bible, the answer is elusive. However, he describes the misuse and misapplication of the curse among all three Middle East religions, the Muslims, the Jewish faith, and Christians. Among the Muslims, one contributing factor seems to be linked to the expansion of Islam after Muhammad's death in 632, which brought Arabs into contact with black Africans many centuries after Noah spoke his prophetic words.
Muslims then used this curse, evidently, in a garbled tradition, to say that black Africans were doubly cursed. They were black because of the curse, and they were destined to be slaves because of the curse. Now, there are also some Jewish passages in the Talmud that have been argued as the basis of, as being the basis of this curse. However, the Talmud is a vast, incomprehensible work for most non-Jews, and it is hardly likely that this would have become the basis of this famous curse of Ham.
Unfortunately, Christians were no better than those of other religious traditions. Carrying the flag and cross of Christ, the Crusaders used war in the name of God. After the Crusades, using the same myth of the curse of Ham, Christian Europeans practiced slavery in the name of God.
The curse of Ham also appears among European writers and was strongly used by pro-slave advocates in the United States before the Civil War.
African slaves were first offered for sale to the British colony in Virginia in 1619. Then between 1680 and 1700, more than 300,000 African slaves were imported into the British colonies of North America. The earliest use of the curse of Ham to justify slavery in America dates back to the 1670s. But the effect of that teaching is still felt today. The myth of a cursed black slave race came from the misinterpreted and misapplied curse of the prophet Noah. That isolated ancient verse in the book of Genesis became a convenient lie, a rationalization for greed. The truth was, using slaves meant cheap labor. Christians who believed in this curse often ignored the central teaching of the Bible, God's love for the whole world. The Apostle John wrote about God's all-inclusive love. For God so loved the world that he gave his only begotten Son, that whoever believes in him should not perish, but have eternal life. Unfortunately, the effect of that so-called black curse teaching still lingers in the hearts and minds of many. Some have taken a pilgrimage, a journey back before the days of slavery, a journey back to Africa and back into the pages of the Bible. These travelers are part of a study tour. Some look to see themselves in the ancient past, and others search for the truth about who they really are.
Well, I wanted to come because the title of the course was The Great Africans of the Bible. And being an African American and just having a strong interest in the development of identity and what that has meant for my people, really, and also as a Christian, and knowing that Christianity in the past has been used for an evil purpose and enslavement and, you know, really in the history of slavery in America.
What we want to do is appreciate all of God's creation. And it's hard to appreciate God's creation if you yourself feel that you are an inferior part of God's creation. And so when one would feel that they are very much a part and equal with all other humans that God have created, now we could come together in a sense of unity a lot easier. Because if you feel inferior, you'll be trying to work against, mitigate the whole idea of that inferiority complex. And that would be the driving force of your union as opposed to trying to come together to do something for God.
Well, my journey actually began almost a couple of years ago when a staff person of mine announced in a group meeting that blacks were descendants of a curse. So that got me searching. And that's how I started this journey. Then I met Dr. Kroeger, took a class with her, and she literally opened my eyes to what the Word of God has to say about all people, especially people of color.
The study tour leader is an enthusiastic professor in her 80s. At first appearance, she's an unlikely source of information about African history, but she's earned the respect of her students.
So, after all, he's going to make the gods look like himself. That's called anthropomorphism.
While others her age might be inclined to limit their activities to enjoying their grandchildren and great-grandchildren, Dr. Catherine Kroeger also pursues another passion.
I hoped that if we could bring people face to face with their tradition, if they could actually see representations of ancient people, highly civilized, brilliant people, and how strong their African features were, if they could look face to face at objects of material civilization created by early Africans, that they would understand the importance that the Bible gives to Africans and the importance that is there in a history that has so often been stolen.
Many places of historical importance can be discovered along the Nile River. And along the Nile, evidence of the advanced culture of Black Africans can be seen in the middle of one of the most important archaeological sites in Egypt, in the city of Thebes. Here at Thebes stand monumental temples, including Egypt's largest temple, the Temple of Karnak. Nearby rises the imposing Temple of Luxor. They display the grand legacy of the Egyptian pharaohs. But located in the temple complex of Karnak rises one giant papyrus-shaped column, one of the last remaining columns erected by a black pharaoh of Egypt, one of the black pharaohs from Cush, who also ruled Egypt, a pharaoh whose name is even recorded in the Bible. His name, Tirhakah. Tirhakah from the ancient kingdom of Cush. Over 1,000 small statuettes or figurines of Tirhakah were found in his tomb.
Yes, and he has an offering in his hand. We are now at the back colonnade of the 4 great colonnades that Tirhakah built. And we're at the base of the columns made distinctively in his style of building. Here is the pharaoh himself. He has a flail in his hand, and he is all pharaoh and all power. The pharaoh here has a strong chin. It's a little hard to see because of the false beard, but look at the full lips and look at the molded nose and the angle of the nose. Please notice that some of the other columns lost their tops. Remember, though, that this much nice stone is a big temptation for somebody else to swipe, and they did.
The prophet Isaiah described the powerful nation of Cush. Go, swift messengers to a nation tall and smooth, to a people feared far and wide, a powerful and oppressive nation whose land the rivers divide. Ancient historical accounts describe how the bow was a formidable weapon in the hands of these Cushite or Nubian warriors. According to the Bible, the Assyrians under their king Sennacherib had overrun the region and captured Judah's southern fortress, Lachish. Tirhakah and his warriors came to the aid of King Hezekiah of Judah.
In 2 Kings chapter 19, there is an incidental reference to a king of Egypt, who's actually from Nubia, Now Sennacherib received a report that Tirhakah, the Cushite king of Egypt, was marching out to fight against him. Biblical Tirhakah is called Taharka in the Egyptian sources, and he belongs to the 25th dynasty.
I knew that Cush was associated with black people and with Africans, but I did not know that it was mentioned 52 times in the entire Bible. And she was saying that that's like more than any other ethnic group, any other nation besides Israel.
And I love the fact that we're looking into proof and facts, not